My name is Jerome Ferry. My cameraman is Alan Eggers. We're doing a video interview with a Marv Hoppenworth, a early mechanic at Hunters Airport. Marv, tell us what year you were born and where you were born.
Okay, I was born in September 16, 1928, and up at Tripola, Iowa, which is in Bremer County. And my dad and mom were Irvin and Laura Hoppenworth, and I went to school in a little one-room schoolhouse called Douglas No. 6, and it was a pretty good way to get an education. You learned a lot, I thought, and so forth. And, I saw my first airplane, I think, was west of town. I was a little shaver about yay high, and it was very interesting, and I recall it. When they started out, the guy yelled contact, and somebody got in front, and I was standing there just bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and the next thing I knew, my eyes were full of chaff.
How old did you?
I was probably 8 or 9, and it was a Curtis Jenny from what I could remember at the time, and I think it was Douglas Harris, but I'm not sure. I didn't know Douglas at the time. I remember my dad used to ask me later on, "Do you ever meet Doug Harris?" Didn't know him, but back in about the 60s or the 70s, I met Douglas Harris up at Oshkosh, so he was one of the early aviators from our area.
Was this this first plane you seen were they barnstorming? Or
yeah, it was barnstorming. And
they put on a show?
I don't recall that. We just heard there was an airplane west of town. We drove out, and there it was, and my dad stood back also. And but I can remember I wasn't smart enough to close my eyes. So
you had mentioned something in your interview about Kellogg's box tops.
Yeah, I got to tell you about that. My two aunts, when I was staying over at my grandfather's, they sent away for a package of little cardboard airplanes, 10 cents and a Kellogg's box top, and I recall in there were 5, they were about that big for the biplane fighters, and there was a Martin bomber in that assembly and a Grumman amphibian. I remember that, and this was also about the time we were seeing the news or hearing the news about the Amelia Earhart thing, and the Navy was out looking for Amelia Earhart with those same kind of airplanes. So that's kind of what I remembered, and this was really a good experience in what I call flat pattern development, because then later on in school I was making all sorts of model airplanes out of construction paper and so forth, like a Piper Cub or a Cub Cooper, those kind of what you'd see in the advertisements, and so it was a good experience.
So you run to the mailbox every day to see if a package was there from the Kellogg?
No, just it just wound up that that was they came to my grandfather's house, and when they got there, then I got the toys. But it was really a good way for introducing somebody to airplanes and the toys of the thing.
What did you do in Tripola? Is you grew up there?
Right.
Did you? What was the first job you ever had?
Well, I went to high school in Tripola, and then when I was 15, I got a job in the Crittenden Hendricks Produce, and I got to tell you about Tripola, Iowa. It was called the egg capital of the world, and this was during World War II. And I think there was 4 produce places, and it was like 17 trucks went out of that town every day to all the different routes, all the way up into Minnesota, all around northeast Iowa, and brought back eggs. And then we shipped those eggs by railroad car to the Army. And they had a situation going where, and everything had to be in wooden egg cases. So, and then they even processed them by dipping them into a sealing oil, and before they were shipped. And I made my living going through high school nailing egg cases, the wooden egg cases. Mm-hmm. And can you imagine a guy nails 54 nails, assembling 7 pieces of wood, and you get 2.5 cents per case for that. But it was a good, honest living, and if you worked real hard, you'd make 50 cents an hour.
So it was kind of like piecework. The more, the more you put out, the more
but
you made.
There was a limit to how fast you could nail. and 20 to 25 cases an hour. Well, 20 cases an hour was about what you could run.
Your dad, did he get caught up in the Depression?
I think everyone got caught up in it. We were farmers. We didn't have money, but we always had food, and we always had everything else. And to tell you the truth, we went to church dressed better than they do now. In fact, I went to country school dressed better than they do now. Mother would not let me out of the house with a hole in my overalls.
This money, this money that you made your first job, Marvin, were you able to keep that, or did you have to help support your?
No, the family was self-sufficient. We lived on a farm, and my parents were very modest, so they were conservative. They didn't buy anything if they didn't have the money, so to speak. And but no, what money I made, I was buying war bonds as I was going, and I graduated from high school in June of '46, and I kept working until the following Christmas. And by that Christmas time, I had enough money saved up. I could have bought a new Chevy, or I could go to school. And I remember Calero Tech's tuition was $720 a year, and room and board was $720, and I had about $1,400 saved up. So between Christmas and New Year's, I went out to California to go to Glendale to go to the Calero Technical Institute, and enrolled as a master mechanics course, which was a full year going to school 8 hours a day. And this was, I thought, a good school. And we went 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, so that's 40 hours a week. And then I did take an opportunity to learn to fly. I got a chance to start with the Air Vets Club, and I went in as a junior member. I got to tell you this was right after World War II. There was 25 guys in our class. One of them had been a 4F from the, declassified in the military. All the rest of them were ex-GIs. So I earned the nickname of Junior. You grow up fast when you're working with a whole bunch of guys, 15 to 5 years older than you are. But it was good, very good school. Every week we moved from one class to another, and if somebody didn't pass that class, he stayed and picked up. There was a new class come through every week, so it was just an automatic progression. I was lucky. I didn't have to drop back any because I didn't miss any days in school and so forth.
Was this during the war years, Mark, when you were?
No, see, this was in '47, so the war was over. Yeah, I was in with a whole bunch of ex-GIs at that time.
There probably was a great demand for mechanics because there was such an interest in aviation.
It was spreading, right. Aviation was spreading quite well into the airlines and general aviation, I guess.
Did you go to a mechanic school because of your early interest in aviation, or because you knew it probably paid fairly decent wage?
It was my interest. I wanted to be a mechanic. I always enjoyed fixing stuff and so forth. I think that's what drew me to it, and I think I was lucky to go out to California.
Then when did you take your aviator's license, or where did you get your aviator's?
I wound up going, I learned to fly while I was out going to school, but I could only afford 30 minutes every other week. And so that took quite a while then. And so I had started to learn to fly in started my first flight in the later part of February. And then I think I sold it somewhere around September and I had 5 hours of dual at that time. But I'd sit alongside the runway and watch the other guys, and I figured I learned a lot from that too, and because I could only afford a half hour.
Did you feel that your experience in mechanic school probably helped you quite a bit?
Well, I think they dovetail in. Yeah, what you know about the airplane, you don't have to learn from the instructor. Yeah, sure, that helps a lot. And like I said, learned a lot by watching the other people fly.
Okay, so when you got out of this mechanic school, then what?
Well, I had to work for about 2 months I worked at Lockheed for a couple of months and get enough money to come back home on. And so then I think it was March, I went to work at the Terry Flying Service in Waterloo, Iowa. And there I remember I couldn't afford a room downtown. I lived above the office, and it was kind of like a lean-to, and you could only stand up in half of the room. But it was close to work, no transportation problems, no nothing else. So then I started working, and I enjoyed working. It was and so forth, and I could do some flying, and checked out in a Taylor Craft, and we had Cessna 140s for instructors, and I think it was somewhere along in August. It was in July. I got my private license. Merle Terry was my boss. He was also the flight examiner, and Bob Pickard was the guy who helped me get my dual for my private pilot's license and so forth. So it was really convenient. You live at the airport, you live it, and you enjoy it, you know. So,
Were you single at this? Still single at this?
oh yeah, oh yes. You couldn't do this on a married basis, no. Because I spent everything that I could earn on either flying or saved up some money, and then I was getting the urge to buy an airplane and so forth. And I heard about this damaged Cub down in a little town called Jubilee. It's south of Jessup. Jubilee is really a church and a store, and that's about it. But anyway, a friend of mine took me down there, and we got to looking at this airplane. The pastor opens up this lean-to of the barn, and there, slumped over in the corner, sits this most depressing looking airplane you've ever seen. It's an old military Cub, all covered with dust and dirt, and slumped over on a damaged landing gear. Well, here was an airplane I could afford, $250. And we made the deal. I'll tell you how the deal was made for it. My mother had to sign for me because I wasn't 21 yet. The pastor had to sign for him because the Colonel Sandrock, who owned the airplane, probably is the one who brought it back from Germany. And he was in the Army, but his father signed for him, so it really was a purchase by proxy, you know. And so when I got the airplane home and got to digging through it, I had an airplane that only had 248 hours on it. And the interesting thing, when I looked it over and I decided this old fabric's got to go, and this was my thing anyway. So I recovered the airplane, and when I uncovered the airplane on the fuselage, out of the belly rolled signal corps messages, empty carbine rounds, and so forth. And so it told me absolutely it had been in Europe during the war, and it had a thick 1/4-inch windshield in it, which is the only Cub I've ever seen with a 1/4-inch thick windshield. It's probably the only one that I've ever seen that came back from Europe. And there was an interesting patch on the tail. It was like a little shield like that, and a Siamese horse and donkey back to back. And I assume it represented the pilot and the observer flying back to back, because this airplane had glass all the way halfway to the tail, you know. The observer would set backwards in, and they used this airplane for spotting for the artillery. So when I got done with it, it looked like a standard Cub again, and but proved to be a good airplane.
What do you suppose it would have been worth after you refurbished it?
At that time, probably...
You bought it for $250.
Yeah. I had $503 in it when I first flew it, and at that time you could buy an airplane like that for $1,000.
Really?
Now, that airplane, refurbished to that condition, would go for $30,000. It's just the difference in the market. Yeah, it's the difference in the market. But I loved it. It did what I needed to do, and My parents lived 25 miles north of the airport. So being single, I'd go back for laundry and family visits. I probably made that trip 3 times a week. And I had a route that I followed. Coming back from my parents' farm, I would just lean right over and head south. And down the middle of an Iowa section at the half-mile mark is usually a fence. And so I'd stay with my wingtip right over that fence and go. And at a certain place, I would turn and cross to the next middle of the next mile. And then when I'd hit the railroad track and the cow shed over here, I would turn 45 and I was lined right up to the runway. And I flew that same route, rain or shine, the same way, about 50 to 60 feet high. And when the weather got down lousy, we were right at home. We were right at home, flying that same route every time. And I remember one time, it was not good weather. I was bombing along, and into view came a truck and a horse and 2 farmers trying to load that horse in that truck. I know we spoiled their morning. I know we spoiled their morning. But anyway, that was my means of transportation, and I think this was about 1.5 years that I had the Cub before I had a car. But the baseball diamond at home and the football field was my airport when I went home up there at Tripola, and you landed on any farm field.
Nobody complained.
No, they didn't complain years ago. And it's just, things were a lot simpler than they are now, for flying anyway.
So when did you first come to Cedar Rapids?
This was, the aviation world kind of went down for general aviation, but I worked in at John Deere's for a little while, and when Jim Watson found out that I was not working there, he invited me to come to Cedar Rapids, and so I came to work for Jim down here in July of 1950. And that was old Hunter Field.
That was still old Hunter. Was Dan Hunter still around at that time?
Dan was there. Jim Watson was the manager, and so forth. And then, I'll tell you something about the municipal. The first time I ever flew down to Cedar Rapids to the municipal, there was nothing but the old farm buildings. The FAA office, I had to go down and see one of the FAA people, and there was Mr. Lloyd Cantrell was the FAA maintenance man, and Harold Hartley was the flight safety man. And they had an office upstairs, like in an old bedroom of that. But it was primitive. And then, of course, while I was in service, they built the terminal.
So what did you do for Watham? Was it mechanical type work?
Yeah, mechanic.
Did you recover?
Later on, I did recover work, but at that time, they were a big beach dealer. And so we did a lot of Beechcraft maintenance. Yeah, Jim Watham was one of the top beach distributors at the time.
This maintenance was this for private pilots around the country that
mostly at that time was mostly business. The plant showed and Iowa Man and highway equipment. You know, all those people that had an airplane, and a lot of bonanzas. We'd get the customers to fly 100 miles to come here. Even ADM down south brought up an airplane to work on. So we were maintaining airplanes probably within a 100-mile range of hunters.
We interviewed a Robert Ray. He was Howard Hall's pilot for years.
Yeah. I worked on his airplane. Yeah.
So how long then did you work at for Jim Watt?
Well, I worked there till my friends and neighbors gave me an all-expense-paid trip to Korea. I got drafted in, it was November of 1950, and I went to Fort Leonard Wood for basic training, and then I had a little trouble crawling the infiltration course. I had brucellosis when I was a kid, lung situation, or diaphragm anyway, a fever. And so I could never complete that. Well, I got delayed, and so then they sent me to Texas to finish, and it was while I was in Texas, I had good grades in my entry test, so they selected me to go into an electronics course at the Guided Missiles School to be a fire control electrician, which means you fix it was old mechanical computers at that time, and you learn all about the gun, the radar, matching it, and so forth. And this was a good job in the military. So then I got my overseas orders, and 4 of us were headed out to Far East Command. Well, it wound up that 3 of those guys went, and I didn't. They went to the different anti-aircraft outfits, and I didn't, and I couldn't figure out why. And one day my name was called out, and I heard it after I thought I heard 8th Army Flight Detachment. Well, it was really 8th Army Flight Detachment. And what it all boiled down to was there was a higher need for aircraft mechanics than there was fire control electricians, and my civilian MOS was aircraft mechanic. So I went up to a line outfit as an aircraft mechanic, and that's where I spent my year in Korea and so forth. It was almost like a stateside job in unfriendly territory. We were a little north of the 38th parallel, and our runways were, I always jokingly said, 3 rice paddies moved in for in, but it was really a good runway.
So when you got out of service, Marv, did you come back to Cedar Rapids at that time?
Right. I came back to Hunter Flying Service, and this is a picture of my J3 Cub sitting in front of Hunter Flying Service there. And it was a good...
What year would that have been, Marv?
This would have been in 1952. Yeah, that was...
And then you stayed at Hunter's for a while?
Yes, I worked at Hunter's for a couple of years, and in that period of time I gave a young lady her first airplane ride, and she enjoyed it. She was a little bit bored, and for 90 miles in a Cub, yes, it's a little over an hour, but she was relieved that it was safe and smooth and so forth.
What part of the country was she from?
She was from Elkader, and she was working in Cedar Rapids here, and it took her up there and to meet my folks and so forth, and but it all worked out. I later on I married Catherine, and married her in '94.
Had she ever been exposed to flying before you took
This
her out?
was her first ride, and I got to tell you this. One of my favorite things to do with that Cub was to introduce somebody to an airplane ride, and I think I have given over 200 people their first airplane ride. Yeah, in all of these years, it's been the biggest thrill I've had, is to introduce somebody to a smooth airplane ride.
Was she scared?
No. She was,
Because she had a lot of faith in you, or because
no,
you were such a good pilot?
No, I don't know. No, it just worked out real good. She knew me for about a couple of months by then already, I think.
So she knew you as an aviator for quite a few years.
Yeah, and you can't really do too much wild stuff in a Cub anyway. It's a good airplane. The nice thing about a Cub is it flies slow, and it'll land almost anywhere. You give a guy 300 feet, and you're in, you know.
Was when you come back to during this time period, was there still a need for good mechanics?
Yes, there was. Mechanics have never been overpopulated that I know of, and about that time, I got an opportunity to go to work for Dr. Lippisch at Collins Radio in the Aero Research Lab.
How did this come about?
Well, actually, it's kind of an interesting thing. There was 2 of the guys came over one day to buy a couple of prop hubs, and they walked into there as they were making their deal for the prop hubs, and one of the guys looked at my toolbox, and he said, "Boy, I'd sure like to have that over there." And I just made the dry comment, "Well, you can have it if I can go with it." And and it wound up, they needed a mechanic for their machine they were building, the Aerodyne, and one of the guys knew me from Waterloo days, so another about a week, they came over and asked me if I'd be interested in going to work for them, and I went over and met Dr. Lippisch, and sounded like a very interesting job, and I hired in, and I came to Collins in July of 1955, and it was the most interesting job I've ever had in my life.
I can imagine you being a mechanic, and you're mechanically minded, and he was probably on the cutting edge of anything he was doing. And
it was interesting to see things happening there that the professors in Ames probably hadn't seen yet. You know, you were one step ahead of them, so to speak. Yeah.
What type of a person was Alex?
A super gentleman, and absolutely, he had a talent that I will share with you. He could talk to someone, and inside of, I'd say, 30 seconds, he knew exactly what their level of understanding was, and he would talk to them on that level. He could talk to an 8-year-old boy and never baffle him, and yet he could turn right around and baffle the experts. He had that range and that understanding to know what your level of understanding was, and that's the level he communicated on. So I say it was a real treat to work with him, and Ernie Seeloff was his engineer, his calculator man, and but Dr. Lippisch just was a genius. And this I'll share with you. When I was a kid at home on a farm during World War II, I was listening to the radio, and I heard about this bat-wing fighter that was running up and down our B-17 formation. Scared me. Didn't realize 10 years later I'd be working for him. The man who designed it, you know. But that he had the fastest airplane in the world at that time.
So what was your projects at Collins Hangar that you were working on at the time?
We built the machine. When I came there was just a tube, a 90-inch tube with 2 engines they were going to set into it, and it was my job to set the engines in and get them to running, and we also did a lot of the building on the full machine. I think you have a picture of that, don't you? Yeah.
And they would give you a blueprint, and
it was basically just shop drawings, and they would come. It didn't get that formal to where it was just shop drawings to match to. Mm-hmm. You built the form per a drawing, and then you built all the stuff across the form, and then you took the form back out.
Was this out at the airport, or was
Yes, it was in the Butler building that was west of the hangar, big hangar, and we had 3 wind tunnels in there, a 2-dimensional tunnel, a 3-dimensional tunnel, and an open throat tunnel. And we worked all 3 of the tunnels for advantages, and he did a lot of delta wing research in there, and watched where with smoke you can see a lot of what air does. And so
was Dr. Lippisch out on the floor quite a bit with you?
I would say about 20% of the time he'd be out there, and it was one of his comments was, "Oh, don't make it so fancy," you know what I mean? Because maybe tomorrow you didn't use it anyway. Yeah. So
did he speak fluent English, or did he have a heavy German?
He had an accent, but he always spoke good German. It was really interesting, though, to hear him and someone else communicate in German. And because I was born and raised in a German community, it took my religious instruction in High German, so it kind of tickled me to hear the old German come through. But he is just a super gentleman to work with.
Did you get to have the opportunity to see any of your projects completed?
They sent our full scale, after it was all finished, they sent it to Oxnard, California. I think the Ames Wind, and did a full scale wind tunnel in there. They said it was the most efficient VTOL airplane they had tested. They were concerned with stability. Now, what we saw here, we were flying these things rubber-powered first across the hangar. They would wind them up with rubber-powered and then release it, and the thing would jump up and inhale itself forward, and then as the power came down, it would land. And then they built some more. They were more efficient. We couldn't fly them in the hangar. We flew them in the Coliseum. We outgrew the Coliseum. We had to go out into Jones Park. And one of these models was like a ballistics and radar nose in the front, one propeller for lifting and one propeller for making it go. And this thing flew into a tree, I'll remember that, and a twig came in and stopped the prop, and of course the lifting, and it rolled out of the tree just like a sausage would roll off a table. And on the third oscillation, it did this and continued the flight. And the neighbors were worried about stability. So it was their loss.
What was this to be?
A vertical takeoff machine with high-speed capability. The same thing that our Harrier is doing nowadays. The only thing with this machine was there was no gliding because there was no wings. And they had to rely on 3 engines if it was going to be built, multi-engines, so if you lose an engine, you'd still go. But when you're in the military, everything is a throwaway society when you have a mechanical problem.
Who were some of the other people that you worked with in the lab with?
Okay, there was, I worked with Red Miner.
What was Red's function?
Red Miner was...
Kind of like your...
he worked in the model, and he would make the little fancy stuff. Yeah. And worked with another guy by the name of Larry Conover, who was quite an accomplished modeler. He had won a lot of contests in the early model airplane days and so forth. But it was quite a gang that we worked with.
How long then did you work with Lippisch?
A little over 5 years. And then when the Navy contract ended for that research on that airplane, then I transferred over into the flight operations area and worked for Vern Ritker over there. And we worked on, we had 4 twin beaches. And that was the Collins's fleet. Right. We had 4 twin beaches there. And so I was very lucky to just be able to move over like that and just roll my toolbox through to the next room, and I was back in working again.
What is this pictures you're showing us, Marv?
This is a picture of the Aerodyne that was finished and built at Collins.
Is this the project you were working
that's
on?
The project, yeah, that's the project that I was working on there at that time. And it had 2 engines in it back to back, and they blew the air down through the front and out the bottom, and 85% of the air went out the bottom, and about 15% of the air went out the tail end for control.
Would this been the predecessor of what the current Harrier they call the Harrier?
It would have done about the same work as the Harrier, yeah. Same job. It would have been vertical takeoff and inhale itself forward.
While you were working out there to Collins, did you continue your flying, your private flying yourself?
Yeah, I wound up, I had sold my J3 Cub to get money for furniture when I got married, and before that already, I had bought a Taylorcraft from Art Craning here in town, and I was rebuilding it and recovered it, overhauled the engine, and had a really nice airplane when I got done. I did things a little customized on it. I had put on a Cub exhaust system, make it nice and quiet. I put in a nice Cessna 170 instrument panel. I had a radio in it out of a B model Bonanza with a loop in the tail, and an air coupe spinner and a Stinson landing light, and all of this. And I call it the Hobo's Bonanza because when you could throttle back just a little bit, it was just as quiet in there as a Bonanza. So, we took this airplane on a trip. I think this was in '56. We took the airplane on a trip to Washington, D.C.
You and your wife?
My wife, for vacation. And we went to the Smithsonian, and we landed in a little airport there in Washington, set up a pup tent and so forth, and we spent about 4 days touring the Washington, D.C., and every afternoon she would take a break and I would go spend some more time in the Air Museum part of it. And when this airplane had, we didn't have the Omni that we had nowadays, and I flew by radio range. We navigated by radio range. And if you've ever done that, the old radio range has, each station sends out two beams at a certain direction, and it's an N and an A, or an A and an N, and they integrate together like that, that when these two beams, you're down the middle of them, it's a solid beat. There's no dot, dot, dot. It's just a solid squeal on the thing. And if you get off to one side, you're going to hear the A more, or you're going to hear the N more. Well, I found a simple way to really know where you're at. The first station identifier is in Morse code, and whichever one you hear the loudest, the first one is the A and the second one is the N. Whichever identifier you hear the loudest, that's the side you're on. And if those two are identical in sound, you're right on the middle of the beam. You'd go over a station and there'd be a cone of silence. You didn't hear anything. So then you know you're over the station, and then you pick the new course on a compass heading, and you go outbound on that one until you get within range of the next station. So that's how we flew out to Washington, D.C. and back on navigating.
The picture there, Marv, of you
Yeah,
and your
this
wife.
this is a picture of our little Taylor craft, my Hobo's Bonanza.
Did you take a lot of trips together? Flying.
We trips like Omaha and trips up to the farm, and we landed behind the church at a little community called Pinhook up there. It was a church out in the country. And we'd go in there on Sunday morning and land and go to church and come back out and go home, you know.
Made a nice Sunday outing for
Oh,
you.
yes, yeah.
Did you go into any fly-in breakfasts?
Not too many, because so
in.
many of the breakfast flights interfere with Sunday mornings, you know, and that's why we didn't take in too many flight breakfasts. But that's a common practice nowadays with the private pilots and get together on there.
Here's a nice photo here. Did you want to tell us about that?
Okay, this was later on. Collins moved from the Twin Beaches to the Grumman Gulf Streams, and that was their fleet at that time.
Were you still with them at this time?
Yes, yeah.
As they went to...
This was about, you know, at this time I was up at teaching school in Waterloo, Iowa. I left Collins in '65. Then I worked for Jim Wathen for 2 years at the municipal airport. And then in 1968, I went to teach school up at Hawkeye Tech. And they were starting an A&P school there. And I spent, I think, 7 years up there.
Did you teach mechanics?
Yes, aircraft mechanics. And there's a picture of our fleet of the Collins, or the Hawkeye Tech fleet that we had up there for the principal of the school wanted the school colors green and gold on our airplanes, and I said fine. I didn't tell him most of it was going to be light green, and it worked out pretty good. We didn't go ahead.
Marv, you were a mechanic for all of these years, and as the technology changed, did you have to go back to school and be recertified or brought up to the latest?
What they wind up doing is I had an inspection authorization, which means you could recertify an airplane year after year, so to speak. And to do that, you either had to do a whole bunch of annual inspections or go to a briefing school like 1 or 2 days. And so you do that every year. And that basically keeps you up to speed with all the new regulations. The FAA always comes out with new mandates, this and that, and that's how we stay current through these schoolings.
You were showing that photo of the Collins Gulf Streams.
Yeah.
Did that take any more expertise from the original planes that Collins radio?
Well, almost always when you get a new airplane in the fleet, at least 1 or 2 of the mechanics are going to go down to the factory school on those airplanes. And I think every one of the Collins mechanics went to Grumman school, and it would be a 4-week course on that airplane. I went to that Grumman school in, I think it was 78 on the Grumman Gulfstream.
What is that diploma you have there?
This was given to me in 1998. It's the Charlie Taylor Award, and after you've had 50 years in the aviation business as a mechanic, and I guess if you have kept your nose clean and so forth, people will probably recommend you for the Charlie Taylor Award.
Is this quite a prestigious award?
It is, from the standpoint, there's not many around. There's very few people started early enough or live long enough to get the 50 years in. And for that, I was fortunate that I started when I was 19 and stayed in the business and so forth till now.
Who was Charlie Taylor?
He was the mechanic for the Wright brothers. And he's the one who built their first engine for them and did their mechanical work. And so that's why the name Charlie Taylor has come up on that.
Marv, after you finished your teaching stint in Waterloo, then did you come back to Cedar Rapids?
I came back to Cedar Rapids in '74 and went back to work for Collins. And I worked there as in the certification center. They installed autopilots and did the prototype work, and then my job was to document or see that the documents matched the airplanes, and conformity inspection we called it. So that I worked there for about 4 or 5 years as supervisor of quality control for that organization, and then I moved back over to the flight operations and became director of maintenance for them for about 4 years, and then finished up as basically inspector and expediter for parts, so forth. So I've put in about 26 years total with Collins Radio in various locations and various times.
Did you, was your seniority bridged?
Not from the first time to the second time. That was a 9-year spread, and they honored up to 7. See, it changed from Collins to Rockwell in that time. So, but I still, 15 years is a good retirement.
And then, what year did you say you retired from Rockwell?
In 1990.
1990. And then you went to, what did you go into then?
Well, about 85, we started a little hobby thing that...
No, I'm talking about the Marion Airport.
The Marion Airport. Yeah, the Marion Airport, I got involved in that in '66. 3 of us bought a farm. A guy by the name of Roy Bleedner, Bill Fahey, and myself bought a farm from a gentleman by the name of Robeson. And it was a 190-acre farm, and we were planning a runway and so forth. And we started, got a Cessna dealership, and we trained a lot of people off that little airport. And I was still working at Watkins at the time. And I remember going out, I'd go out at night and do the 100-hour on the engine on one evening and the airframe on the next. And whenever the night when I did the engine, I'd probably be out there doing a run-up at 11 o'clock at night and go once around for a test flight. And let them use it. And then did the airframe the next night. And,
so this was the original Marion Airport?
That was the original one that's east of town.
That the Waltons now have?
Yeah. Yeah, I made the first landing on that one with the Civil Air Patrol airplane Cub that I rebuilt for him. Yeah, it's a lot of people worked on that airport since that time.
So when did you officially quit being a mechanic and under somebody's employee as far as being a mechanic?
That would be in
after
about 90. When I don't do work for other people anymore, and primarily because of the liabilities you get. Yeah.
Would you like to introduce your wife?
I would love to. This is Catherine. This is the young lady that I took for her first airplane ride and fortunate enough to marry her. This is...
How many years you been married?
50 or 40? 47. 47, yeah.
What did you think you were going to do with him when he decided he was going to retire?
Oh, I didn't worry about that. I was still working, and I
Oh, you
know
were?
him.
Uh-huh.
He always has more things going than time permits. So,
I understand you. Well, tell us about your family. Do you have family that?
yes, we have 3 children, and our eldest Jay is married and has 4 children, and he's in Cedar Rapids, and he has his dad's love of flying, or
He
not
flies
flying
also?
so much. No, he doesn't fly, but he loves airplanes and being around airplanes and talking airplanes. And then our second son, Bill, is married as well, and they live in Maryville, Tennessee. Now, he is a certified aircraft maintenance technician and works in the field there.
How about grandchildren? Do you have grandchildren?
Jay has 4, and Bill doesn't have any children. Now, our daughter Mary is here in Cedar Rapids. She's married and has 2 girls, and she is works for the Department of Human Services. She's a social worker there. Does real well.
Did you ever have the opportunity to take your kids up for a ride?
Oh, yes. Yeah. I used to, when I was working for the Civil Air Patrol evenings, I would take, first I took Jay out and worked with him. He worked with me, and I'd pay him $1 an hour out of what I was getting, and then after he got older, I'd take Bill out, and I paid the boys $1 an hour while I was working with them, and gave us a good father-son opportunity to on the
Spend
job
some
training.
quality time and get some good
very
training.
good. Yeah, very
Did
good.
they either one of them go on to get a license?
The younger son went on to get his, he went up to Hawkeye Tech and got his NP rating, and
Over the years, we have gone to the Experimental Aircraft Association
Oshkosh.
every year. That was our vacation as far as the kids were concerned. You talk vacation, and that meant Oshkosh, or the other way around. And they all just really developed a real interest in the airplanes there, and a knowledge of airplanes and of the people in aviation.
How about yourself? Did you find yourself becoming very involved in aviation, interest in aviation also, or?
Well, you can't live with it and not be interested. I did take flying lessons and did make my solo cross country, but then I didn't fly anymore because we had gotten children, and I decided that I should stay on the ground.
Did you wish later that you would have picked it back up? And
I think it would have been nice years ago to have done it then.
I understand that the two of you started a second career here just recently. Would you like to? Maybe Catherine would like to sit down.
there you go. Thank you. What it wound up, my first grandson, about the time he got to be 3 years old, I thought, well, I should build him a toy and a pedal airplane maybe. And so I did that, and while I planned it. And while I was doing that, a friend of mine, Paul Poberezny from the EAA, had just gone through the campsite with his granddaughter under his arm. I thought, he ought to have one. So I'm going to build 2. Well, then my boss found out about it, Charlie Hall. He wanted one. Okay, I'll build a 3rd one, Charlie, if I can take it to Oshkosh and show it. All right. Well, I took 3 of those up to Oshkosh and parked them right alongside of the real full-size pits, and the people went bananas. And so driving home that year, I said, Kathy, I think we've got a winner. And when we came back, I had a draftsman friend of mine draw up the plans off of my patterns, and I wrote the instructions out, and we made drawings and sent them out. And you know, we advertised on October of 85, and by Christmas we had sold over 500 sets of drawings. And each year we developed a new model for a while, and now we've got 11 different models out there. And right at this point, we're approaching 19,000 sets of drawings, and they're going all over the world. We put together a wheels and a hardware kit here for the people to keep them out of the hardware store looking for all this stuff. And we do the decals here. Sigsmund Zuma prints our decals, and there's a gentleman in western Iowa set up a factory. He makes all of the steel parts for the people, and my son in Tennessee does aluminum kits. And so with this, we've touched the lives of people all over the world. I think we've probably sold between 5,000 and 7,000 kits, somewhere's in there. I haven't kept track. But there's a lot of people build without buying our kits.
Did you mention the fact, do you have a website?
Yes, we do. She has set up a website. I'm not computer literate, she is.
What's your function in this operation, Catherine? You take care of the bookwork?
I do the bookwork. I do the mail outs of the plans. He does all the kits and things, you know, the heavier items like that. But I do the mail outs of the plans and keep up the website and do the email responses to questions.
Where's your little factory? Out in the garage or?
It's out there, and it's
in the bedroom.
in the family room. Has converted to. I do my own drawing, and so forth. So we're pretty little closed nucleus on this, but it's we have a lot of customers out there. I'd say we have 10% of the EAA's membership as customers, and about 10% of those are repeats. They've built one, they built another.
Do you have any photos that of these that you can show us?
Ooh.
We have it on the wall over
Yeah.
there.
So this is a sample of the product.
This is the one we call the Pedal Eagle. There was an aerobatic team that used an airplane that looked like this, and so we did this, and it was the most popular of our models for quite a few years, and so forth. And then people were asking, what's the simplest one to build? So we developed the little Scorpion, and this is our other two grandchildren in it.
What's their names?
That is
Mary and Alan in that one.
right, and that other one was Michael and Wendy. Okay.
Can you foresee the days when this business will be so large you'll no longer be able to handle it?
Well, if we increased our advertising, we would probably increase our business, and that's not my goal. I'm enjoying it, and I want to keep it as fun. That's the
You
primary.
don't want it to get so large that you'd have to
No.
get out of it.
No. And,
What's some of your customers that are furthest away? That
oh, we just shipped something to South Africa, and I have got customers in Australia, New Zealand, Tasmania. I got a beautiful picture of a kid in a little pit north of the Arctic Circle, sitting in his reindeer skin jacket and boots. They had to light a candle to focus the camera on for a picture because it's all dark all year round up there. So, like I say, it has really been fun touching the lives of so many people in such an enjoyable way.
now these planes, they're made out of strictly
3/8
plywood, or is there
3/8
fiberglass involved, or?
No fiberglass, 3/8-inch plywood, and I've avoided the fiberglass aspect because that starts getting expensive and messy.
Shipping.
And we showed John Doe how to build it all, and the plans, even if he's going to bend his own steel, we show him how to do that. Because a lot of people aren't buying the kits. They're over in, Singapore and all those places. You know they aren't going to run back here for parts, so they've got to do it. And we've had a tremendous amount of photos back from them. We're in our 5th photo album of pictures from people.
What an interesting second career.
I couldn't have prayed for a better retirement project, you know. I'll share my personal philosophy with you. We serve God by serving His people, and aren't I lucky that I could do it in such an enjoyable way?
Yes, you are.
That is truly the treat.
Marv, unless you have anything else you want to relate to us, the History Center wants to thank you both very much for sharing your memories with us. It's been a very enjoyable session.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for the privilege.
Very good, thank you.